Hello and welcome to the Back to Birth Your Own Instruction Manual Masterclass. This is a masterclass in understanding your own imprint story, and I am so glad that you're here. So I'm going to share a story about my friend Hannah, who is actually here. This is a picture of the two of us in a different moment where we were both experiencing our imprint stories. So, we had a friend come to visit when we were living in Mexico, and it turned into such a good experience of diving into this topic. My friend Hannah, who's given me permission to share this, was coming from Belgium to meet me in Mexico. About 3 days before she left, she was talking about packing. She said, I've already started. I put things in, I pull them out, and I'll probably repack half a dozen times before I go. And I said, That's really interesting. I don't pack that way at all. She said, Really? And I said, Yeah, that has a lot to do with our birth imprints, the way that we are born. What do you know about your birth? She said, I don't really know much, but I'm visiting my mother and I'll ask her on the way out. And so she did. She heard her birth story on the way to visit me. So let me tell you about a morning after she had arrived at my house so that you can hear the pacing of it. We were getting ready to leave for a day trip. For me, when I'm getting ready to go somewhere, if I'm organized and not just flying by the seat of my pants at the last moment, because everything normally takes longer than I think it does every single time, I need to prepare the night before. I need things to be reorganized, and I can then let things unfold once I know what to expect. And that helps me to have a morning that has less stress because I've learned about my own imprints and what I need to do so that I don't end up stressed completely out. So the night before, I had chosen my clothes. This is like the best possible version of my story. Put snacks in my purse in case we got hungry, and I woke up early to give us plenty of time. I didn't want either of us to feel rushed. She told me that she had woken up very early and had already been up for hours. She'd flown from Europe the day before and woken up around 3 a.m. She was feeling really productive. My husband went downstairs to make his morning coffee, and as she was working, she suddenly looked up and asked my husband what time it was. When he told her, she realized there was still plenty of time. She went upstairs and she rested for a bit. I had gone downstairs to feed the cats and was in the middle of that process with our 5 cats at the time. And it was now about 20 minutes before we needed to leave. She came flying down the stairs and she looked really concerned. She was now panicking and starting to move that through the house, saying, We have to go. We have to go. We're going to be late. I, on the other hand, was thinking, 20 minutes? That's so spacious. There's plenty of time. I felt great. I was almost ready. So I stood watching the cats finish eating so I could put the outside cat back outside before we left. Hannah came over and said, so gently, should you just pick her up and put her outside with her plate? We've got to go. I looked at my watch and said, We still have 3 minutes. We have plenty of time. And she said, We've got to go. It was fascinating to me. Two people in the exact same moment, perceiving it completely differently, just transitioning out of the house. So, what makes that so different? It's imprints. It's our earliest experiences showing up when we leave the house, when we go to sleep, when we wake up, when we first learn to feed as newborns. All of these are imprint patterns. All of it is colored by how we came into the world, including how we experience time itself and how we feel at each stage of a transition. So we had this moment, and it couldn't have been more different. So I'm Rebecca. For 30 years, I've walked alongside people finding their way back into relationships with their children and with themselves. I don't have your answers. I have a way of seeing that helps you find your own. So, what is an imprint? So, our earliest experiences, really the first time that we do anything from conception, pregnancy, birth, and the first days, leave a pattern in the body and the nervous system. So, it's not something that we're consciously remembering, but it's something that's recorded in our bodies. And that pattern, whatever that pattern is, repeats itself over and over in plain sight without you understanding what you're seeing. So we make up stories to make it make sense. We think it's a flaw, but it's actually not a flaw. It's not something that you did wrong. It's a pattern that longs to be seen and shared and received. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. How do you see the pattern? So it shows up in the transitions, like I was talking about with my friend Hannah, and in our milestones, our big developmental milestones. So a transition is a shift from one state to another. So waking up, leaving the house, or leaving, starting or finishing something, going to bed. Milestones are the bigger transitions. They can be the developmental milestones, the way that we learn to walk or talk or run or ride a bike. How do we do that? Which is always an interesting thing to think about. How did I learn to ride a bike? And how we leave home or we don't leave home, or what happens when we get into a relationship or what happens when the relationship ends. Those are milestones. So these imprints show up at our milestones and at our transition moments. It can sometimes be helpful to look at the milestones, like what happened at the big moments in your life. Sometimes it's easier to see. You can also look at any transition, and there's information in that transition, especially when there's someone new in your environment or you're doing something a little bit different or something you've never done before. Like if you're going on a trip to a place you've never been and you are navigating each thing, you can pay attention to what you're doing and what you always do, and also what the people around you do that's different. So that contrast makes it easier to see the imprint. So I'm going to say it again in different words. You're not broken. You're patterned. This is a pattern. This isn't about blame. We have enough of that in our society. And a smooth, uneventful birth still leaves an imprint. So it's not about if you had a traumatic birth, this is for you. A smooth and uneventful birth still leaves an imprint because being born is a big experience, no matter how well it goes. And you had an experience of it that's remembered in your body. So come into this conversation with curiosity. Your experience of being born is yours, held in your body, whether you know the story or not. And if you ask your parents or others what happened, they may have a very different story about your birth. It can provide clues, but pay attention to what your body's story is showing you. It's the one that matters most. Now, when Hannah asked her mom, I'm going to actually tell that story in a couple minutes here. When she asked her mom gave her enough information that she was able to connect with her own body story. But her mom's experience was not the same as Hannah's experience. So I want to talk just for a moment about the brain stoplight, because this is a way that you can notice the places in your imprint that are either, smooth or that have some bumpy places, because that's just information. And it shows up in, as I said, the milestones and the transitions. So green, calm, connected, like the part in the morning where Hannah was doing her work and she was perfectly fine, plenty of time. She went back and rested. Yellow, yellow is the warning signs that we tend to override. The fork in the road, the places where we still have a choice, where we don't have a story that's taking over or a body impulse that is saying, this is what needs to happen now. We've got to go is a great example of that red light. So it's past the point of choice. Hannah just kept saying, we have to go. We have to leave. What are we waiting for? Why are we not leaving? There's urgency there. And so we can pay attention to those places in our sequence, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, where we have activation in our nervous system, where we have, a feeling that takes over that needs our attention. And it's not good or bad. I just want to say that too. It's just information. It's not red is bad. It's red is you're in survival. There's something happening that needs to be seen. So, window of presence is a range that we can stay present and connected. Stress can push us past its edges and into either too much or into shutting down. Rest and awareness widen it. So when we are able to stay in our window of presence, that's like, again, that place where, and even for myself, that morning when I was getting ready, I had slowed everything way down for myself and done a lot of preparation the night before so that I wasn't overwhelmed. And so that rest and awareness helps to widen that window. And because Hannah was just discovering her imprint, she didn't know yet what she needed. But I guess the last thing I'll say there is that you're staying within your window. You're present and you're able to choose. Like in that moment where I was looking at the cat who was still finishing the food and Hannah trying to take the plate outside, I wasn't feeling any urgency there. I was able to choose, okay, we still have 3 minutes. We don't need to go yet. It's okay. So I was in a place of choice. So every transition has a shape. So notice yourself across the whole arc. Which part is easy for you? Which part do you get stuck? Thinking about that red light or the yellow light. Maybe there's some places that feel a little bit sticky, but sometimes you're fine. Maybe it's green. And so before the beginning is the first part of the sequence. This is the place where we are preparing to go somewhere. We were preparing to do something, but we have not started yet. In birth, this looks like we know we're going somewhere. We don't know where we're going, but we're beginning to get ready to be born. So there are all kinds of things that happen in the mother's body that are started ideally by the baby's body. So I'm going to talk about an ideal birth sequence because when we're looking at what happened, that's where we might see what your imprint is. So we have let's call it a blueprint birth. There's a blueprint for the way we biologically expect to come into the world. That may or may not happen that way. So ideally, we have a before where our body is getting ready to go into labor and we are making preparations to be born. Our mother's body is preparing to go into labor, and ideally, it is initiated by the baby. And that is then the beginning. So all of the preparation, we're getting ready to go somewhere. Now the birth is beginning. Labor has started in whatever way. The water breaks, contractions begin, but it is initiated from the baby. Beginning, so contractions start or water is broken. Hopefully, contractions start soon. The middle part of the birth is where the baby is moving down, preparing to leave her mother's body. Ending is where the baby actually comes out into the air. And then the after, ideally, is where the baby is resting on mother's body. And the two of them are able to rest together and experience what it was that just happened because it's a very big deal to be born. And we need a minute to rest. We need a minute to adjust from being on the inside to being on the outside, and for our mother to have the experience of us being now on the outside with her and integrating the experience that she just went through giving birth. So we go through this sequence every time we do anything. So my mentor always gave this example. So I'm going to use this, Ray Castellino, and it is in a sequence before the beginning. So I have a pillow. I am going to throw this pillow. I have an intention. That is the before the beginning. The beginning, I reach for the pillow. The middle, I swing back. The end, I let go. And then in the after, my hand comes back to rest. So we go through this every time we do anything, but the imprint might show up at a particular place for you. So if you didn't start labor on your own, you may not have the same sense of a beginning as someone whose labor began on its own. If you were a C-section like I was, where I labored, so started labor on our own, I initiated the labor, so there was the before. Then the beginning, labor began. We labored for 26 hours, somewhere in there in the middle. I think I got disoriented. I think we both did. And then at the end, that was where the doctors decided It needed to be a C-section birth. So the end for me happened really fast and with assistance. And then the after, I was taken away from my mother. My mother was under a general anesthetic, and so I could not stay with her. My father was not in the room. It was at the time where that didn't happen. And so I went to the special care nursery, and that's where I stayed and for about 6 hours. So my after, rather than being a rest and integration with my mother, that didn't happen right away. Now, so my sequence when I'm going through something in the story that I shared with you, I gave myself a lot of time and I started the night before so that I wasn't rushed. So the time we got to the end, I had space because that's the part of my birth that got compressed. And that's the part of my sequence that often gets compressed unless I'm really mindful about it. I don't plan enough time for the ending. And so it ends up taking always longer than I think. Yeah. And so I have to be aware of that. But the idea is to notice what is happening, what you do every single time, which is the biggest sign that it is a birth imprint. And then you can have choice back to that yellow light. What is it that needs to happen that will help? So I'm going to finish the story of Hannah's birth because she found out this information. And I want you to pay attention to what happened earlier and how that showed up. So when we had our little morning dance in the kitchen, Hannah hadn't told me what her birth story was. She hadn't told me what had happened. And so we were just seeing and showing up and being curious about it. And we were laughing the whole time too. So Hannah's mother said that her water broke, but labor didn't start. So before the beginning, Hannah initiated birth. Contractions didn't begin, but water broke. So something was happening. The doctor came and gave a shot. We're guessing it was Pitocin, and still nothing happened. So the doctor left for a dinner party. Hannah's dad gave her mom a massage, and she fell asleep for a couple of hours. When she woke up, the doctor checked her, and she was fully dilated. But this wasn't going to be a home birth, so there was a mad dash to the hospital, her mother holding her legs together the whole way. They got her to a room, and then two pushes, and Hannah was out. So there's the pattern. Time to go, time to go, time to go, and then nothing actually happening. And then suddenly, everything all at once. That's what shows up for Hannah when she leaves the house. This intense, we've got to go. She literally says those words, while in real time, there's actually plenty of space. It's not that knowing her birth story created it. She said, we've got to go her whole life, she told me. The story just explained it. The body's experience is the foundation for words we choose later when we have words. And mine showed up too without my planning it. I was born in 2 minutes, and mine showed up too without planning it. I was born in about 2 minutes. So at 8 a.m., I started up the stairs to the car, and we were ready to go by 8:03. So that was my whole sequence of leaving in the best possible way with preparation. That was the whole sequence, beginning, middle, end in 3 minutes. The before was me wandering around the house feeding the cats. No activation in my nervous system at all because I had done the planning so that I didn't end up compressed at the end. Hannah, with her very different birth, felt stress and pressure for a full 20 minutes before we left. We just named it all out loud and we stayed connected. And when we got to the car, the after, we talked about it. I never planned to show her my imprint. I didn't say, you show me yours, I'll show you mine. It just appeared because that's how it works. You don't have to struggle for it. You just need to pay attention. Our imprints are always with us, but we can become friends with them when we slow down, especially in our transitions. That's where we get to have a different experience of them and bring in choice. So notice your patterns in real time. What happens when you're planning to start something? What happens in the beginning when it's time to start? Do you feel an impulse to begin? What happens in the middle? Do you feel excited? Disoriented? What happens at the end? Do you feel compression? Does it go fast with ease? What happens for you in the after? Or do you skip a rest and integration, start the next thing like I do? It just shows up because you're living it. Just pay attention with curiosity, not judgment. So, your practice for this week, choose one transition, just one. So, that could be getting up in the morning, it could be leaving the house, it could be coming home or getting ready for bed. Notice your thinking, your feeling, your body across the before the beginning, the middle, the end, and the after. Writing it down also helps. So does having a new person in your space whose different pattern reveals your own. And if you're going to do this with someone else, it's also really helpful to name it and say, hey, I'm playing with this. I'm paying attention. I wonder what would show up if I did this, or, how are our patterns different? So, in the after of this masterclass, we are going to be having a workshop for exploring your own imprints as a curious adult. How does it show up? So, the workshop is the held space. This masterclass prepares you, gives you the ideas to understand what it is that we're talking about. The workshop is a held small group where you'll gently meet your own story with support and time. And it's here if you feel called by curiosity to continue exploring. It's never too late. Not at 30, not at 50. The patterns we carry can be understood and worked with long after they're formed. So begin when you're ready. Explore your own imprints in the workshop, where you'll touch your own story with support. And if that doesn't feel like the right next step, play with it. Be curious about how you're showing up. Be curious how this imprint pattern might be showing up in your everyday life. Thank you so much for being here. So grateful for your time and your attention, and I will see you on our next call.